Välkommen alla sammen till Q&A number 3. Thanks so much for all the questions. Those are some good ones there, and subscriptions. The channel just a year ago had barely over 1,000 subscribers, and back then I was able to reply to everyone, but now it's just getting so big and I'm too busy with so much other things that I don't even see most of the comments coming in. But if you post some comments on the second channel that I have, the seasonal diet, I'll see those and I can get back to you. But on this one, it's very difficult. You can also message me on Instagram and Facebook, and then I'll get back to those a bit more often from time to time, especially if you ask about the sources. If I'm ever not clear about any source, or you just want a better explanation from me, I will always be happy to reply, no matter how busy I am. Even if I have 1,000,000 subscribers, if someone asks me to explain my sources or explain my reasoning, I will always do it. This is the whole reason I started the channel in the first place, because everyone else on the internet and TV just talks a whole bunch of shit and they make up history. They do this in general, but especially Viking history, and there is no other culture that is subject to so much slander and absolute idiots talking about it online, unfortunately. And then when you go to them, when you try and contact them and ask them what their source is and why they say the things that they do, they're nowhere to be found. And even the ones with only a few followers, you ask them, by email, and I was sick of all that when I was looking for these things. My quest for knowledge many years ago when I was young, and I took an oath that my channel would never be like that. I wanted everything focused on the sources. So thank you for following this channel and helping it grow. I know my videos are not the most entertaining or the best quality sometimes, and I know I'm a bit of an asshole sometimes, and I say things that piss people off. But just the fact that this channel has grown so big shows that people really do value the sources and academic style interpretations and the ideas and theories that I provide. So thank you very much. To show my gratitude, I'm doing a little giveaway. When I get to 100,000 subscribers, there will be a giveaway. I'll draw the names out of a Viking hat, and the winner will get an item from my shop sent to them, any item they want. To enter, just enter your email on my online shop. You can cancel it right after if you want. I don't bother with email blasts. I maybe send 1 or 2 emails a month, and you can cancel that if you want to after the drawing. I just need the email so I can contact the right person and announce the winner. And I'm also doing a second giveaway only for Patreon supporters. The same thing. I pick out of their names a hat and announce the winner at my 100,000 subscriber celebration video, which should be coming sometime next month. And they will also get any item from my shop that they want. So anyway, on to the Q&A here. Ironside, asking about the relationship with the Slavs, especially the West and South Slavs. Yeah, so I did a video on the Rus, but I think you're probably wondering about maybe the Baltics or maybe the West Slavs, like Polish or Czech or something like that. So yeah, especially Poland, or as it would have been called back then in the Viking Age, Wendland. Those were the Wend people. They were basically referring to the Slavic tribes and people living in that area bordering the Saxon lands. The Wends were very friendly with the Norse, actually, especially in the late Viking Age. When we see King like Olav Tryggvason especially, and even we think actually a sea town on the north of Poland was actually the fortress where the Jomsvikings were based out of, the elite kind of mercenaries. And they probably had some Slav warriors as part of their ranks too, so there definitely were Slavic tribes at this time by language and culture, that's for sure, but genetically they were probably a mix of Germanic and Scandinavian too. I mean, bordered the Saxons right there, and long before the Viking Age, actually, there were the Goths who migrated in large numbers this way, so definitely big Scandinavian influence in West Slavic areas too, not just the areas of Rus, Russia and Ukraine area. Just kidding, have I been approached by any TV movie producers to contribute? If so, what would you tell them? Yes, I have been approached by a couple and I've told them to fuck off. No, if I was approached, well, the first one I was approached by, I shouldn't really say this, their names, because I might get in trouble for that, but one approached me and I absolutely did not support the message that their TV show was portraying. I'll just leave it at that. So I told them to fuck off, basically. Another one approached me with kind of some questions about a series that you all know, and I didn't really want to answer them either because I was pissed off at them, but and I feel like they just kind of wanted to start some drama with me, actually. So yes, I would be very happy to contribute to any Vikings TV shows or movies, but only if it's a project that I respect, and you know, director or producers that would really you know, come at it from the right angle and from a respectable angle towards our ancestors' history. My opinion on Varg. So yeah, Varg Vikernes, most of you know him probably. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. I like him a lot. I definitely don't agree with everything he says. Don't agree with everything he says about politics, definitely, and I definitely don't agree with everything he says about the myths. But still, I mean, I've been a fan of his since I was 13 years old. I love his music. I love his books. I really love his books on paganism. I love his theories. I don't agree with everything, but I still have a lot of respect for him. And it would be cool to meet him one day. But yeah, a lot of people are going to be pissed off at me for that, but oh well. I don't take people's past actions or their political or life views as a reflection of their work. I read every single book and I take ideas from them and I take knowledge from them, even though I might not like it. So I think to just a lot of people, especially on the left, they like to ignore people's views and books and opinions on the Norse beliefs and Norse history just because they don't like that as a person. But I think that's really a shame, and yeah, that has no place in an academic setting. You know, when we're actually trying to discover lost ideas, we need every theory, we need every great mind on this as possible, even though we may not agree with these people. Rocky Heintzman would like to hear about traditional folk music. So, asking about the sources, so we know basically nothing. I mean, we know folk music, but this is going back just a few hundred years, right? As far as music from pagan times goes, we know pretty much nothing. We do know things like the poetry, like the meter and the words and the rhymes and the structure of their poetry, of the lyrics to their old songs. But nothing about the instruments, nothing about the melodies, nothing like that. And actually, a lot of the instruments became illegal just after Christianity came into Scandinavia. So we really know nothing about the oldest pagan songs that we have. But, you know, modern groups like Heilung, Vardruna, they're reconstructing these using old instruments that would have been used at the time, and they're doing an amazing job. Vardruna and Heilung are two good ones, but there's lots more out there that are doing a really good job at reconstructing what the music would have sounded like. Killa Kobugi, boxers, briefs, or free balling? I only wear briefs when I absolutely need to. It's just not good for you, you know? You're getting your nuts all cramped up into yourself. It's better you just let it hang low, because, you know, the balls need to be a little bit cooler. They need to be a little bit away from the body in order to produce testosterone and have a sperm count. If you keep them too close into your body, hugging up onto your gooch all the time, it's not good. So I free ball or just normal boxers as much as I can. But briefs, you gotta wear those sometimes if you're training or, you know, swimming or things like that. Then he asks, what is your favorite weapon throughout the Viking Age, or just any history in general? That's a good question. I like spears. I really, really like spears. And it's spears are actually kind of just skimmed over in a lot of these movies and, you know, old tales and things like that. But in reality, spears were the most used weapon all the way from the Viking Age and if even further on. And as we go further back, spears were the first weapon. They were the first hunting weapon. So spears and humans have the longest history together out of all weapons that have ever been invented, besides maybe a rock. You smash someone with a rock or a hammer. But yeah, I like spears best. Eryn Zanos, favorite mythological creature? Probably Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged horse, because there's so many cool mythological creatures, but Sleipnir is actually one of the most valuable things to gods and us humans. Sleipnir's name just means the slippery one. I did a video on him, and what Sleipnir is, he's the force in nature or the universe or whatever. He's the force that allows our soul to slip in and out of our body. It allows our hugr to slip in and out of our body and go to other realms or do these crazy things. And anytime that Odin or Hodr gets on Sleipnir in the myths, they are traveling to other realms. So it's just a very, very valuable part of ourselves and part of the universe. And it's an awesome horse too. Erik Andersson, should modernity have the right to criminalize or falsify our heathen symbols? Another question. Tattoos might get them in jail in some countries, but they are based on religious beliefs that has over 20 years now. No, they definitely don't have the right to criminalize or falsify our heathen symbols. It's happened, unfortunately. First of all, it's just a symbol, and I don't think any symbol, no matter how much hate might be behind it, should be illegal. It's just like free speech. You should never be punished for saying words, but unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in. So there are some symbols that are going to piss some people off, and in some countries even get us thrown in jail. Yeah, it's wrong, but it's happened, and there have been some hateful people who have used these symbols for not a good purpose, and, you know, we are suffering from it today, because some of these are beautiful symbols with really ancient, powerful meanings that we can't even use anymore. We can't get these things tattooed on us, or we can't make flags out of it and things like that, because it's illegal or hateful or viewed as hateful. But yeah, that's just the world we live in, unfortunately. I'm wondering if it would be possible to take it back. Some of these symbols definitely not. I think they are going to be tainted and illegal now for thousands of years. But I think some symbols we can take back when we show people the real meaning of them and show them that it's not something hateful. gerrardfc, what is your interpretation on Manus and Twisto that Tacitus wrote about? Good question. So there are a few different theories. Some think that it's Thor and his son Magni. Some think that Twisto is a son of Tyr instead, which would go back to the Indo-European sky god Deus. Something that Twisto is Ymir, the primeval giant at the beginning of the universe. We can't be sure. The only thing we can be certain of is that these are two very, very old beings and two common Indo-European figures, basically. We have records all over Europe of various people being descended from divine human figures. Hercules and Twisto and Magni, as Tacitus wrote about the Germanic tribes, they're just a couple that the tribes there believe that they were descended from, but it happens all over Europe. I'll have to do a whole video on these to uncover all the evidence, but I think, you know, like every primitive culture in the world, these were maybe real humans, but they were real humans believed to be possessed by a god. In all the sources that we have of gods being real humans, it's not that the actual human is the god, but it's the spirit of the god that possesses these humans for a short time. Even lifetime, it can be a long time. We see tribal cultures alive still today that believe their god is living with them. So those are just my thoughts, but yeah, I'll have to do a bit more research and go into a deep, long video on that. Conspiracy Woman. Has Norway, Switzerland, and Russia grew tremendously in popularity as places to visit? Is it because of the Vikings TV show? I don't know. I haven't lived in Norway for, 3-4 years now? 4 years, so I can't say I know, and I haven't traveled there that much either lately. But I think it's always been a popular place to travel. Maybe a little bit more because of Vikings, but I think most of the tourism going to Norway is just kind of old people that like to see, fjords and nature and stuff like that. It's not kind of Norway has never been a popular place for the young, Viking searching people to go. Thomas Starns. Only question, would you do a video with Björn Andreas Bull Hansen? Yeah, I'd love to. I like him a lot. He is a one-of-a-kind Norwegian. I really like his videos. I like his thoughts, but you guys have to realize a lot of people don't know this. People like him, people like me, we are like 1 in 1,000 in Norway. It's so rare. People that, love nature and want to be close to that, and people who lean a bit more on the conservative side, and people who speak their mind, and people who don't like to do what they're told, and people who are just kind of a little bit of a trouble, a little bit of a pain in the ass for the overlords, for the rulers. Norwegians in general are very compliant to the very unkind, unjust forces, tyrannical forces that are ruling over Norway. Not all Norwegians, like I said, there are many, many good ones that don't take any shit, that stand up for themselves and speak their mind, like Björn Andreas and me, but it's just very rare. So, yeah, I would really like to meet him. And I think everybody likes him, but they get kind of a false idea about Norway from watching his videos, because he is really a unique guy in that country. Torsten Scott, would you ever consider making calendars that accurately depict the holidays, blah, blah, blah? Yes, definitely. I'm working on it. I will. It's going to have to be... I'll try to get it done by this year, because at the start of the year, the Norse calendar would be the start of the winter, so that would be Vetternatter sometime in October. It's going to take a lot of work, because if I do that, I really would want to do that right, and I really wouldn't just want to put dates up there for you guys. I would want to give full descriptions of what would have been done at these historical days throughout the year. So I'll try and get it done this year before October, and if not, then it's going to have to be next year. An export Norwegian, what food do you miss the most? Geitost. I definitely don't miss geitost. Probably fish. I really miss the fish. Fish is just something that humans have eaten a lot of in general over the thousands of years. But in Norway especially, there's a lot of fish. I could eat fish 2-3 times a week. Previously in history, I'm sure they ate it almost every single day. It's a very Norwegian thing, and I love it, and there's so much good fish, and it's just such an easy food source in a land that is not very hospitable towards food, and where food is very hard to come by. So I really love fish. I wish I ate it more, but it's just in other parts of the world it's very expensive and not so accessible, and it's not that good either. So I would really like some Norwegian fish a few times a week if I could. Too intelligent for my... how about intelligence and gingers? I feel for you. You know, society has bullied and made fun of gingers for a long time, and it's wrong. It's racist. You know, it sounds all funny when we were kids bullying gingers, you know, growing up, but it's literally, it's a whole people that's going extinct. It's so bad. It's gotten to the point where gingers don't even get with gingers anymore, and they're not making babies with each other. It's so sad, because I think they are beautiful people that aren't going to even exist in a few generations, and you know, my people are going to be right behind them. So it's sad. I feel for gingers, and You know, I missed the times. Well, I'm not old enough to remember this, but if we go back a few generations, or even more so, a couple hundred years, from the sources that we have, and even more so in very old times, that basically all the British Isles were a ginger at one point, and now look how rare they are. So it's sad. We should really do something about it. I can't do anything about it. It's your guys' job yourself. Gingers need to get together, start making babies, having a lot of them before you all go extinct. But I could help if you need me to. Then he asks about the brownie elves and the fairy folk. So yeah, those are English folk traditions, which I don't know about too well. And Celtic too, really, but and I hope someone looks into this stuff. It goes back to the same thing, you know, preserving the culture of the native British Isles. Everyone loves all the Viking stuff, but I think the Anglo-Saxon and Celtic native beliefs are just as cool, and they're even in more danger of fading away, just like gingers. So I wish some people would come out and spread good, logical knowledge about the Anglo-Saxon and Celtic, you know, original beliefs of the British Isles, like so many people are doing with the Norse today. So I would definitely like to see a bit more scholars and, you know, people online and rebuilding those things. Floortje, okay, there's a few questions here. I'll answer it one at a time. How are you? How's the writing going? Writing is going like shit. I don't have the time. I should have finished the book. I got close to finishing the book last year. It needs some more work, but I haven't had barely any time to finish writing my book. So, yeah, until something changes in my schedule, it's not going to happen. But, yeah, we will see. How do I see the future? How do you think Norse Germanic paganism will develop in the world? What are you going to work on your future dream? I think Norse and Germanic paganism and animism, like you said, is growing, and the more people understand animism, I think the more people are going to come back to these beliefs. A few years ago, it was mostly cringe pagans that had just hijacked the religion, unfortunately, but now, as people get a better understanding, and a better understanding of animism, and a better understanding of all primitive cultures around the world, we start to realize that these aren't all that different after all. And the more we understand animism, I think the more people are going to come back to it, because it does make a lot of sense, and it is a religion that's very deep, and a religion that people can get behind, especially, you know, all these Europeans, you know, especially the girls doing the yogas and the spirituality. They're going and looking to the East, right? They're looking to Hinduism and Buddhism, which is great, but we have just as rich a spirituality in Europe too. We just need to rebuild a little of it and kind of push it into the mainstream, really. But that comes with some difficulties. I'm hoping that I could keep that revolution going pretty much, and go build basically people's, you know, interest in their own native European spirituality. That's where I see that going, but it's going to take some work, and it's going to take some time. Work on your future dream. How are you going to form a community? Yeah, there's lots of plans. That's too much to go into. I have a lot of different ways. It's making millions. It's that's what it comes down to, is making millions and the income to buy the land, and then it's having a good passive income to keep that sustainable, especially at the start. But once we get it up and running, it ideally will take nothing, and it will be completely sustainable, and we'll have our own food and own, you know, meat and own resources, and can do everything ourselves, just like they did thousands of years ago. But that's going to take a few years. How do we celebrate the annual celebrations on a larger scale? This would go back to what I'm speaking about. There are just small groups of pagans and communities here and there in different cities all over the world. But if we get more and more people into it, we can celebrate these things on a massive scale, like festivals where thousands or tens of thousands of people are going, and focus that only on paganism, the pagan high festival. So that's one thing I would really like to see going. Start a full pagan festival or something a couple times a year. Do I see my future in America or Europe? Man, nothing would make me happier than to set up the village and live in Europe, but especially Norway, it's just not going to happen. There's not enough freedoms there. There's too much regulations. The government has their nose so far up your ass in every aspect of your life. The village that I'm planning is not going to be possible in Norway, so we're running out of countries where it is actually free enough to do these things. So it might just end up being the US, but I'm definitely open to looking at other places where it's doable. Yeah. Anton. Deities could have represented magnetic fields or aura energy. Yeah, of course. This is what I think Thor, in a way, represents. Watch my video I did on Thor. Did our ancestors have knowledge of the aura or electromagnetic field? Yeah, when we use these words, you know, in modern times, that gives kind of people the wrong idea of what our ancestors could have believed and had understanding of. Like, yeah, they didn't necessarily know how the electromagnetic field of the Earth worked or the electromagnetic field around our bodies, and you know, they didn't have the physics knowledge to know how all that works, but they could observe these things, you know, and use logic to fill in the rest. Like, hey, we know that every living thing has some sort of energy around it, some sort of energy radiating from it. They knew this. The Indians knew it thousands of years before the Viking Age. You can call it the aura, you can call it our electromagnetic field, whatever. But if humans have this surrounding energy field, then of course the Earth would too, and of course everything else in nature would. Remember, all these things were believed to be living and having a spirit, just like us humans. So could that, in a way, be related to the representation of the universe as a giant tree, as he asks here? Yes, not just the universe, but again, everything living. Nothing is different from each other. A tree, especially Yggdrasil in the Norse beliefs, symbolizes the universe. It symbolizes the world as a whole, and it even symbolizes human bodies. This is very clear from the sources in the myths, and even as some kennings and you know, the Norse political metaphors suggest. They even believe this in the Viking Age, but it goes way further back. Probably the Slavs too believe this. I don't know that much about it, but yeah, you can see how multifunctional the myths are. The deities represent seemingly various things, but it all makes sense when you understand animism. Like, everything is not different from each other. Humans are no different to a tree or an animal or a rock or the earth as a whole. All these things were believed to have a living consciousness, and that's why deities can represent multiple different parts and aspects of all these different things. All living conscious things function the same way. It's just on different levels of consciousness, of course. So yeah, really good question. Thank you. I don't know a whole lot about the Slavic beliefs, but I would really love to get into it some more. User 739, did I go through a major weight loss and fitness journey? No. Not really. I think you maybe saw my video when I spoke about how I got sick. I got sick and I lost like 15 kilos, like 30 pounds, but I put it back on now. I was just sick back in October. But I used to be big. I was never fat. I've always been athletic. I've always played every single sport. But when I did powerlifting and strongman, I got big. I got like 115 kilos, not that fat either. I was just strong. But now I'm like a good 95, 100. It's a little light for me, but I fight at 93 kilos, so that's a good weight for me right now. Daniel Jonker, Southern Hemisphere. So how would you celebrate and adapt the celebrations in the year? And what calendar would they follow? Yeah, it's just a matter of flipping the calendar, basically. I even did a video on this. Check my video about pagan holidays in the Southern Hemisphere. If we're going off the lunar and the solar cycles, it's going to the southern hemisphere is just flipping things. So Vetternatter, which is the start of the year in the Old Norse calendar, that would be in October time, but for you guys it would be in last month, like April. So it's just flipping things like this, and your Yule would be, when is it? That would probably be in your June coming up soon. But yeah, I did a video on that. You can go. Susan Schafner, just asking her drying fish and voyages with fish ever eaten raw. Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course they did. I think we have some archaeological finds of like drying posts for fish from the Viking Age, just like the same thing is used today. We also have a legend of how lutefisk was born, the Norwegian kind of nasty fish dinner that you eat around Christmas time. The Vikings burned down a village, and the lye, the burnt ashes, like formed in a puddle, in a little puddle there, and mixed with the water. And fish fell in there, and it was preserved, and some nasty Viking came along and ate it, and he thought it was good. And that's basically how we make lutefisk today. It's lye preserved in fish. We don't know if that legend's true or not, but they definitely had some drying fish. Drying fish is one of the oldest methods of food that we have in history and all over the world. So definitely they did it, and I'm sure they would have eaten fish raw back then too. It's yeah, not that. Semaj, thoughts on Book of Right by Ragnar Redbeard? I've not heard of it. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. Okay, yeah, that sounds, yeah, it sounds like I would probably like it. Just reading a quick little introduction of it like now. Yeah, I'll check it out, see if, yeah, see if I can get my hands on a copy like that, and I'll give that a read. Rough Homestead would love to hear and learn about older agricultural practices we can employ today on our homesteads. I'm not a farmer. I know, of course, about agriculture in ancient times. That's all what my kind of second channel is about. But for the purpose of this channel, the myths go very much into agriculture, and the spiritual beliefs and the gods go very much into agriculture. Watch my video on Freyr that I did. And spiritual rituals, and also, you know, basic understanding of nature and the way these things work. A lot of it was for a good harvest and things like that. This was one of the most important things that our ancestors could do, having, you know, a good harvest, because if they didn't have that, they would die. So this was very, very much a part of their religion. And yeah, if we just look a little bit deeper in the myths and the symbolism, we can see that and even learn a few things ourselves that we can use today for those spiritual beliefs. Carlos Crecelius, thoughts on how the Viking settlement in North America failed. So yeah, with the sources don't say a lot about that. They tell about the settlement, but not really about how it ended or even when. First, we see some hostility from the Native Americans, but in the sources and sagas that we have, but it's not really enough to, you know, make that the pure reason that the Vikings left North America. So I don't know. I think there's some unsolved mysteries there, and definitely I think they stayed there a lot longer than we believe, but for some reason they did end up leaving. Or maybe not. Maybe they just integrated with the Native American population. Who knows? But yeah, that's all cool ideas. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. James S. I know you said you're a fan of Varric, but what do you think about his obsession with the placenta now? Yeah, exactly. You hit it right on the head there. I loved his old books, and it feels like everything new he's coming out with has something to do with the placenta, which I definitely don't agree with. And this is coming from me. I agree with probably 90% of his interpretations on the myths. But I think he's going a bit overboard with that, all this placenta stuff. It's definitely explains some of the myths, but not. I mean, he's basically suggesting that it's almost every myth lately that has something to do with the placenta and the female organs in there, which is definitely not the case. The myths are complete. The myths describe all sorts of things in nature and the universe, so it's not just about, reproductive organs, Roman, glad you're pumping that big dick Norse energy out into the universe. Alright, I'll give that a try. DC, want to know my ancestry test DNA results? Yeah. Are you descended from berserkers? Cruel Wolf. I would love a sit-down conversation between you and a certain podcast. Any chance you'd be willing to sit down and discuss some modern political topics, religious spirituality, and giving a well-read North Pagan's view? I'll probably get banned if I do that. I don't know which podcast you're talking about. Yeah, but if you didn't say it out there, then I'm assuming that it's one of the ones that is not very politically correct, man. If I go on one of those, I'm gonna get canceled. I'll get banned if I do it. So I probably wouldn't do that right now. Once I have fuck you money, once I have money that I don't really give a shit what people think about me or whether they can take me down or cancel me from wherever, yeah, I'll do these podcasts and then I'll really come out and give my unfiltered views of the problems and philosophies that the world really needs to see. But until I have fuck you money and I can support myself on just my own income that I'm generating, I don't think I should be doing that. Hey, Ghiman, can you talk about Evi the Boneless and some of the sources are accurate? Yeah, the sources say different things on him. So that's why we're not sure. We're not sure where he died. We're not sure exactly what he did because he seems to be like a few different people from the sources, just like his father, Jdoggy. Well, Jdoggy is probably like 7 different people from the sources that we have, but Evi, we definitely don't know the full story on him. I should make a video about it. Yeah, I'll probably do that pretty soon, actually, because I've done videos on the Rolo and the Jdoggy and things like that. So yeah, I'll do a video on Evi. Tyrannasaurus human, are you open to doing anything with Survive the Jibe? Yeah, sure. I like him. I like his stuff. Yeah, I don't have any bad things to say about him. Yeah, I'll do a video with him if he wants to. Jackie Schenk. I'd be interested in the songs sung during the sacrifices, particularly the Disa Blut. They are lost. They are lost, unfortunately. In fact, Adam of Bremen, when he was recording, I believe it was the Disa Blut, but he didn't call it by that. It was some sort of sacrifice in Uppsala. And he wrote down in that source that they sung songs so evil that I do not want to repeat them or something like that, or they should not be repeated. So he actually knew the lyrics. He could have written them down in his book, but he didn't. So they are lost. Only thing we can maybe use is the Sami, or I have a book coming on the way right now. It's about the ancient Finnish religion and their kind of songs that they used in religious practices. So there may be something in there that we could use. It maybe wouldn't have been the same songs that was sung in the Norse sacrifices, but it could be similar, and it might be easy to just switch around some things and reconstruct it and interpret it and change it in a way that the Norse would have sung it at that time. So yeah, that's cool. I'll look into it, but yeah, we don't know, we'll never know the exact songs that they sung at these things, except that they did sing songs that the Christians thought were very, very evil. So 16:1. I'd be interested in your views on the recurring theme of travel in the Eddas, not just Onan, but by Thor and Loki, and Wanderlust among the Germanic tribes. Yeah, so Odin sometimes travels to different realms, of course. In the myths, it's Odin and his travels, and it's traveling into different realms. It's the soul traveling out of the body, that's the Eddas. That's like in the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda. That's what those myths symbolize. It's traveling to the realm of the dead during shamanic journeys, or trance states, or just dying and coming back to life. That's what a lot of the myths surrounding Odin are about. But sometimes in the sagas, Odin is listed as a real person who travels a lot around various places in the world, and that we hear of him in the sagas, definitely. Thor and Loki, yes, they travel together a lot, but Loki is always around a lot in the myths. He's maybe the one that shows up more than anybody, and it's because Loki is the catalyst, right? Loki is the force in nature that brings change. Snorri even said it, that Loki is the mover of story. So Loki is not just with Thor, but he's in most of the myths wherever some sort of big change is occurring, wherever some large push of some force of nature that is required to bring change. So Loki has to show up that way, just as he does in nature when there are big changes. Cat Times, what is your opinion on the new movie Northman? Yeah, I did a couple videos on that already. You can watch that. I really like the movie. I would have just liked a little bit more battles. I know a lot of people went to the movies kind of expecting a good old Viking war, a Go to Valhalla movie. There was just a lot of one-on-one fighting in there, and it was like a horror movie, and I liked it. I really like Robert Eggers' style of directing, but I would have liked a little bit more kind of battles between armies and things like that. AfroThundermusic, what are the most accurate TV shows and movies about Vikings? Yeah, 3 questions in a row here. Yeah, Northman is the most accurate TV show, or the most accurate movie about Vikings so far. 13th Warrior also isn't bad. Funny enough, Vikingarna, the Norsemen, the comedy show that you guys might have seen already, that's actually pretty accurate, and they've used some pretty accurate stories in there, and they've kind of over-exaggerated and made fun of it in like a mocking type way, but still, I think there's some very good historians working on that show. It's a hell of a lot more accurate than Vikings, I'll tell you that. Chess string for life. As an individual who speaks pretty much only English, would visiting Norway be plausible? Yeah, everybody in Norway speaks English. It's no problem. What would the best tip, if you have, for anyone wanting to visit? Bring your money. Bring a lot of money. Norway is not a place you want to go to on a budget. And even if you try to go on a budget, you're just going to end up wanting to kill yourself. Even if you're rich, you're going to go travel in Norway and want to kill yourself because everything's so damn expensive. And you don't really get that much for your money either. You'll be paying away a ton of money for a little piece of shit sandwich like this. And you'll be paying a ton of money for a hotel and a rental car that's all little pieces of shit everywhere. So bring your money. And preferably if you could go out and get in nature so you don't have to spend that much, and that's the best places to see anyway, but still the hotels and car rentals are going to cost a lot, and the food, so yeah, don't go there on a budget. If you are struggling with money, wait till later on in life until you have the money to do Norway comfortably and really enjoy it and not be stressing about money, how much you're spending on the whole trip. Herbs Therapy, what is your preferred Scandinavian music? Yeah, Vardruna, I love. That's most of what I listen to these days. I always liked the black metal since I was a kid. That's the Scandinavian music. Yeah, that's about it. Jdoggy, 1997. Can you go into more details between Norse paganism and Hinduism? Man, that's too long of a video. That you can't even do that in one video. That would take a lifetime almost to look into all those things. At the root of it, it's everything. Everything is similar. But yeah, what Hinduism turned into is not what the original Hinduism is, or what they call dharma. So not the Dharma. I should really get someone to speak on that because I'm not knowledgeable enough on Hinduism or the Vedic tradition to speak about all the similarities. But I know it's pretty much everything at least has some similarity, and we descend from the same religion if we go back 7,000-8,000 years. So yeah, I should have an expert on here to speak about that and not do that video myself. Were the first settlers of Europe, as we know, the Celts, if so, how they diverged from later peoples. Not the Celts. No, the first people in Europe were there long before the Celts, and even before the Indo-Europeans. They were, what's it called? Is it called the... some culture, some haplogroup, something that early Neolithic farmers, and then Neanderthals, of course, before that. So yeah, the Celts, the first Europeans came there long before the Celtic language and religion existed, but they descended and they evolved into some parts of Europe, and they turned into the Celts. So yeah, the Celts, not the original. Chels, duscher, I'd like to know more about your interests in Norse history, what specifically, and combat clothing, besides. Yeah, that was my main inspiration to start the channel, frustration with inaccuracies on other channels and the internet in general, and on TVs and things like that. To be honest, I started the channel just kind of talking shit. I was just doing it for fun, and I wanted to get some knowledge out there and kind of call out all these people who were, most of them, just making up lies. That's why I originally first started the channel, and it went that way for like a year, but now I'm here a year later, and it's actually, I feel like it's a job. First of all, I'm making more money off the YouTube and my side businesses and things like that than I am from my day job that I'm working now. So now I'm to the point where it's almost going to turn into a full-time job and a career. So it means everything to me now. I have lots of plans to it, and I'm so happy the channel has grown so big, because now it's just not me talking to a couple hundred subscribers like it was a year ago, but now it's thousands of people seeing these videos and seeing that there are a lot of inaccuracies and false histories other places on the internet that are just lying about our ancestors. So yeah, very happy about that, to be helping. John Adamson, he's asking about the Gaul and the Gaelic religion and the gods. So yeah, they're Celtic. The UK and France are just two of the many places that practice Celtic paganism, but most of Europe really did. We go to Switzerland and up in the Alps, even Spain, and even as far as Turkey and some places practiced Celtic paganism if we go back far enough. We just know very little about most of those, but Celtic paganism, as I would say, it's the one that was practiced most of all in European history as far as the landmass goes, at least. It's just such a shame that a lot of the information and original sources about all of these places practicing Celtic paganism have been destroyed. We have quite a bit, but I would really like to see more people and more great minds reconstructing the Celtic religion based on the sources that we have, not just from the UK, but all over Europe, really, because they all practiced different variations of the Celtic religion. Jesse 904, do you think Norway is a good place to move? I've said this my whole life, pretty much. If you want a nice, comfortable, good life, Norway's great. Norway is perfect. But if you want a little bit more out of life, if you want something great, if you want something, out of the ordinary, above average, then Norway is not a good place to move. So it's really it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, right? Because it is one of the most comfortable places to live in the whole world. Everybody has it good in Norway. No one's really starving. No one's really struggling to pay the bills. But no one's really living a great life either. If you are living a great life in Norway, that's fantastic. Then Norway is a place for you. But for me, no. I want a little bit more out of life. But that's up to each individual person, whether you would like Norway or not. Definitely test it out first before you move. Really like to know more about the invasions on Northeast England. Yeah, that one's too long. That would be... Yeah, that's not just one video. That's many things to think about. There's, of course, the initial invasions. I mean, it's 200 years of history, which we actually have a lot of sources for. It's everything from the invasions to the fighting, to the language, to the trade, to the settlement, to the integration, all those types of things. So yeah, that's a really long subject, not possible to really speak about in one video. Kati Wisdom, do you plan to attend the Vista Viking Fest in September? Yeah, I've been wanting to go. It's been COVID now for a couple of years, so I don't think they've been having that festival, but it's near where I live, so yeah, this year I'm going to try and make it. Differences between Old English and Old Norse paganism, but do you think it's reasonable to fill in some of the gaps of Old English with Old Norse? Yes, definitely. I would like to see this a lot more. So sure, we have a lot more sources for the Norse religion, and we have to take that because we just don't have that much on the old Anglo-Saxon paganism, but they were basically the same religion, just with some few different practices and beliefs. But so we just have to use what we have, take the Norse sources and bring that into what we could reconstruct of Anglo-Saxon paganism. But then there's a few little pieces of evidence, a few little sources and things that we can determine from what we know about Anglo-Saxon paganism. It's not much, but there is a little, but it's enough to make it different from Norse paganism and make it unique. And I would like to see a lot more of this, basically, where applicable. So that would be cool. Joseph Peck, what inspired you to create this channel and put so much work into it? Yeah, I answered that question just 5 minutes ago. And also, what is your overall opinion on the various pagan YouTube channels out there? Some are good, and some are bad. Yeah, I won't name names. I don't have a problem with any of them. I would rather make friends than enemies, always. So I have never gone out there and talked shit about other channels, and I won't unless they start it. I really hope they don't start it, because I don't want to have to go and watch their shit. I can't stand to watch more. Some of them I can't stand to watch more than a couple minutes of their videos. But if they actually come out and saying something about me and making attacks, then I have to roast them. I don't want to, but I'm just gonna do it. But that means I have to spend hours watching their videos and tearing them apart, which I really don't want to do. And as long as no one starts anything, then I would be happy to be friends with everyone. DJ Jinx, anything on Old Norse sports would be cool. Rituals men had to do to prove themselves worthy. I did a video on sports. I just dove into it really quickly in that video. I could do a lot more. There's tons of mentions of it, but it really, in the old sources, it really doesn't go into the specifics. They just said they did skiing, or he was a very good rower, or he was a very good swimmer, or he was a good wrestler, or spear thrower, or something like that. So we know the sports that they played, but we don't know anything about the specifics, like the rules, or the style, or the scoring, or the audience, how often it was practiced, or was it kind of rituals, was it for the high festivals, competitions, things like that, how closely was it paid attention to, was there teams that people cheered for, home heroes, we just don't have any clear records of that, pretty much. And rituals that men had to do to prove themselves worthy, yeah. Basically, there's probably a lot that are lost. We don't have sources of these. But throughout all Europe, not just the Viking Age, but all Europe, and even going back to Indo-European times too, they call them the Korios, but just these young men who come of age, they're turning into men, and they were basically cast out of society. You guys all know this from the movie 300 when the Spartans did it, but every place in Europe did the same thing. They cast out the young men to live in the wild and just live rough for a certain time, and they come back in as men, and they're accepted into society as citizens. So yeah, that's the main ritual, to have young men prove themselves worthy, but there were probably much more than that, actually. Ofoten, the history of the Bygdeborg. So yeah, Heimdall, a really cool place just outside of Trondheim, small town. One of the only, it is the only city that's named after Heimdall, the god. So yeah, that's an awesome city that a lot of people forget about when they look at these place names. But that's a great spot in Norway there. Yeah, the Bygdeborg is just kind of these fortresses that we find all over. We find them in Scandinavia, but they're really all over Europe. It's just a strategic position for a fortress. They build it up on a hill to make it easy to defend for any invaders or things like that. A lot of castles were built on these things, like the ones we see in Germany. But yeah, we find them all over Europe. It'd be cool to visit some of them. That would be interesting. I might have to go look at that on my next trip over to Europe. Floortje, can you tell more about Frisian history? Definitely. I love the Frisians. They have some awesome history. I haven't really done much on the Frisians yet, but I definitely will. Dogestad and the trade center. So Dogestad, it's basically because of its wealth and its success as a trade center in the Viking Age, but it was in modern day Netherlands, but was back then Frisia. That made it get the attention of the Vikings, and in the 9th century this resulted in the whole city just getting fucked by Vikings. Vikings always attacked and looted the city for about 20-30 years there. So yeah, there is some awesome history there, and just Frisia in general, even long before the Viking Age too, so definitely we'll be making some more videos on that. DB 0145, would you ever write a book on correcting historical accuracy, interpretation, custom, tradition, pairs, magic, and any sort of guide to stray away from mainstream misinformation? Yeah, so that's a lot of different subjects, and each of those deserves a full, long book that you mentioned there, but the book I'm writing now is on prayers, because it's one of the things that interests me the most. How do words and prayers and invocations, why were these believed to have such power to them in ancient times? I mean, it's just words. So this is something that I never really understood, which is why I'm writing a book on it, to dive deep in it. And I'm also writing it to, it's to people, guiding people straying away from misinformation like I always do, because I see the stupidest prayers in Norse paganism. It's people saying a Christian prayer, completely honest, and they just switch out the gods' names for Norse gods. So it's ridiculous and it's annoying. That's why I'm writing the book on this. But I'll give you just a preview. Prayers is not like you know them in the Norse religion. Pretty much every single record of prayer we have in the Norse sources, or Germanic too, any of these, it's not a prayer, but instead it's an invocation. They're not begging to some god, blah blah, please help me with my job request, please help me with my depression, la la la. It's an invocation, basically saying what you want, giving the words to the power, and you might mention a god's name with hopes that that would help. So very different prayers and invocations. Nico Severitt, in animism, is there an explanation about how anything started, everything, creation, the earth, and also the whole universe? So yeah, really, animism by itself is not a religion. animism is just a part of all religions, really. All religions have a little bit of animist beliefs in it to a certain extent. So animism by itself doesn't have a creation myth, but there's creation myths in all the different mythologies, from the Norse to the Greek to the Celtic to the Hindu, whatever. They all have a creation myth. And it's kind of... Animism has a part to do with that. Once you understand the animism and these very, very ancient, primeval forces in the universe, and if you understand the animism in that, then all these myths, these creation myths from different parts of the world, they start to make sense, and they start to even line up, and they kind of agree with each other a lot of the time. So that's all really cool. I did video on Ymir and the Norse creation myth. You can watch that. Zack Curtis, I'd like to know your thoughts on Christians getting mad about Marvel Comics appropriating their faith by making Jesus the first mutant. And he asked, what the hell? Is Jesus in Marvel now? That's new to me. They've done the same thing with, yeah. So I don't know. I haven't seen that. Did they put Jesus now in the Marvel movies? Who knows? Yeah, I don't support any of that. But, it's for kids. So you got to remember that telling these myths, telling these stories in the way that the Marvel universe does, that's the same way that we would have told the myths to kids in very ancient times. Of course, they grow out of it, and then they grow older, and they understand the deeper meaning in it, but I'm not against teaching kids these myths from a very early age in a fun way like that, like the Marvel Comics. But the problem is when adults see these things and then they turn into the cringe pagans. That's the issue. James, as an American with Viking blood who grew up Catholic, I have left Christianity, getting back to my deep heritage roots. I would love to learn more about Norse holidays and traditions so I can celebrate and get in touch with the animist way. Yeah, I got a whole playlist on that. Check it out. Norse holidays, blues, the sacrifices, the traditions, all kinds of historically accurate things. That's like the second playlist down on my channel, so you can find that right there, and all the sources are there too. Phillip Whitcomb, you speak of animism and how spirits surround us. You say there are a variety of spirits, trolls, elves, etc. Do they have a physical form to them? If they don't, why do we give them specific labels rather than calling them spirits in general? Yeah, really good question. Of course, the spirits or the gods or energies in nature and the universe, they don't have a physical form. But humans definitely manifest them into images that have a physical form. I'm definitely a believer that these spiritual beings don't have a physical form. It's the person or the culture that is the one that manifests them into a physical form and creates their image, whether it be through a statue or a painting or just in their own mind. But all those images of the spirits and gods reflect themselves and their own culture. So the spirits are the same all over the world. It's just different cultures have different interpretations of them, and that's why they look different when we paint them into figures or statues or things like that. This is the Greek and Roman philosophers said this a bunch of times. That's my belief too. But on the other hand, especially when we get into elves and trolls and fairies and other mythical figures, it's really incredible how similar all cultures around the world view these things. So that makes me believe that these spirits actually do have some form that they take in the spirit world. It's a difficult question, and I'm open to a lot of ideas. But it's very important to remember that they all have a function, right? It's not just a little spirit wandering around in the spirit world, watching over us and things like that. All these spirits have a function in nature and are attached to a certain process in nature. So that's just one thing we have to remember, even though they definitely do seem like conscious, free spirits sometimes. Inverted Isoxelis. Can you tell us about the Swiss Vikings? We can't say Swiss Vikings, because they definitely weren't there, but I think you're probably just talking about people that religion. So, of course, the Germanic tribes migrated there. It was originally Celtic in Switzerland, but Germanic tribes migrated there eventually, of course. going a Viking just means raiding, so were there people that raided there? Absolutely. I don't know if we have that much sources of it, but it would have been... I forget the Germanic tribes that settled Switzerland. Was it the Lombards passed through? Was it the Swabians, Burgundians maybe passed through that area? I think there's other Germanic tribes too. I'll maybe put a map here so you can see. But yeah, there were some Germanic peoples that migrated to Switzerland, of course. Samster cat. My question is for Don. Are you a cat person or a dog person? Dog, definitely. Sorry, hamster cat. But I'm not a big fan of cats. I like my girlfriend's cat, though. That one's okay. But, yeah, dogs. But I don't like most dogs either, the shitty little dogs. I like big dogs. That's the only house pets that I like, really. Andrew B., what is your true and complete opinion on Old Norse specialist Jackson Crawford? I like him. I've said this before. I like him. He does great videos. He has great translations. He does great work. But he's a linguist. I'll say that for you guys again, because some people are never going to get it. Jackson Crawford is a linguist, okay? He is not an expert in the Old Norse religion. He's not a historian. He's not an archaeologist. He's not a study of anthropology. He doesn't know anything about primitive religions of the world. He's definitely not a pagan either, so he's never claimed to be, okay? He is doing his job. I'm not saying anything against him. His job is to be an expert in the language, literature, poetry, all those things in the Old Norse sources. It's not his job to be an expert on the religion, and he's never claimed to be an expert on the Old Norse religion. You all made him an expert on the Old Norse religion, because so many people are just so lazy they can't read any books besides his translation of the Poetic Edda and watch his videos on YouTube, and they want to call themselves experts. But man, you really need to get some more reading in. And I can give you a list of 1,000 people who are much more knowledgeable than the Old Norse religion and Jackson Crawford. It's because he's the easiest one and the most accessible, so people have labeled him as the guru of Norse paganism, but that is so wrong. But it's nothing against him. It's just people who have turned him into something that he is not. So that's not his fault. Pat R. I would like to hear more about trolls, gnomes, and the spirits living in the forest, except... Yeah, I've really been meaning to. I made one video on trolls, but there's so many other kind of spiritual beings that we find in the folk tradition, even more than we find in the Old Norse sources, and we can learn a lot about paganism that way. The only problem is these things come from just a few hundred years ago, so a lot of these things have been distorted with time and Christianity and don't reflect a true, clear pagan belief. But if we look a bit deeper and look in the, holes, then we can definitely discover some things about paganism like that. WP, yesterday we celebrated in Germany, make a huge fire and invite everyone to the purpose. That's all to Scandinavia too. Yeah, I think Valpurgisnacht he's talking about, lighting the bonfires on the 30th of May. Unfortunately, I don't think these things are celebrated that much in Scandinavia. It makes me sad. The only real pagan holiday that I would say we celebrate in Scandinavia is probably Midsummer. I mean, there are many other pagan holidays that have pagan origin, but most people aren't doing the actual ancient traditions that were still happening. Besides Midsummer, the Germans actually are much better at going out and celebrating these things. Even if they don't know it, they're going out and celebrating all these festivals, and the Germans really like to party. I lived there for 2 years, I know, and they're much better at continuing these traditions. Even if they don't know the ancient pagan, celebration, they're still actually doing it by starting these bonfires and doing these crazy things and parties in the whole city and things like that. So yeah, that's really cool. I wish it was celebrated in Scandinavia like they do in Germany. Igor ZA. Why Vikings never been in the Adriatic Sea? They have. So we have a couple examples, well, at least passing by there. First is a group of the Vargarians serving in the Roman Empire. They went to Italy for a fight, and they would have passed by the Adriatic Sea, probably stopped along there. Another one was Olav Haraldsson, who traveled to Italy and probably would have passed by there too. We don't have much records other than that of them passing by anywhere close to the Adriatic Sea. I'm sure they went there, but it would have been for trade. Maybe some settled down there, but not in that big of numbers. But yeah, they were definitely there, just don't have much records of it. How do you feel about other religions? What happens to those who do not follow the Norse faith after death? Yeah, so I can't speak much about the afterlife because I have not been there, or we have, because I believe in reincarnation, as do Norse pagans, but we've all been there, we just don't remember death most of the time. Wherever we go, the only thing we can say for certain is, that I believe for certain is, that we are all going the same place. All life goes the same place after they die. Humans will go there, dogs will go there, animals will go there, insects, trees, grass, anything living that dies is going to the same place. We're all going to the same place. Life is life. There's no difference between anything living versus not living. So wherever we go after death, we're all going to the same place. But like I said, like me, it's reincarnation. But after we die, there's a period of being in various different realms of the dead that we go as a waiting space. But it basically, the universe revolves around rebirth and cyclic lifestyle, things like that. That's my belief and what we know from the sources, not just in the Norse, but all over the world. Elliot, what do you think of the elves? I know you said they are forebears, but they seem to be treated in some form, mainly in the Poetic Edda, as actual mythical species. Yeah, so what I think, the elves definitely are ancestral spirits. We have a couple clear sources for that. In the folk tradition, they're sometimes listed as that, but the clearest example is the Elder Saga of Olav the Saint, and a little part called the Tale of Olav Geirstadalf, which I visited his burial mound a couple months ago. You can check that video out. And he dies, and he's buried in that burial mound, and he is worshipped as an elf. Clear as day right there. But yeah, definitely you're right. In the Poetic Edda, and even more so in the folk tales, the elves seem to be little mischievous little creatures. There's definitely, some missing parts and some unanswered questions, and the Norse sources don't provide an answer for us here. So we kind of have to look at other cultures at different places in the world, because they all believe something like this. They all believed in something like elves. The Australian Aboriginals, though, they have the most detailed view of what elves are. They call them little people, though. They're not elves, they're called little people. It's basically like a little person, a little spirit that's living inside of our body, almost like a video game controller. Little person living in there, and when we're alive, and then when we die, it leaves the body. So the elves could be thought of as a part of our soul. Of course, in the Norse, we have many different aspects of the soul. There are 8 of them. But this elf, this little elf person inside each one of us, and it's probably the most active one after we die in this particular realm. The elf leaves the body when we die, and it's active in this particular realm, the world, Midgard, whatever, and our other parts of the soul go further away into more distant realms. Those are just my thoughts, but I'll be doing a long video about elves, and we'll see what we can uncover when I look at the sources and kind of organize them like that. Shitso man, what are your thoughts on Christianity? Is there any merit to it? When did it become corrupt? Was early Christianity genuinely good or not? Yes. Yeah, well, so Jesus is good. I like him. I mean, he says some things that most of us can agree with. Jesus was a pretty good guy. What Christianity turned into after him was not good for the most part, but if they would have actually listened to what he said and actually followed his words, then we would be in a good place. Christianity would have been great, but a lot of people just took the loyalty and the belief that people had in Jesus and use that to manipulate and do evil things for their power. So that's not good, but early Christianity definitely, I could say, was good intentioned. Jesus was definitely a good person, but what that turned into over the next 1,000 years up until the Viking Age and the more than 1,000 years, about 1,600 years, the Christians did some very, very bad things. So that's what it turned into, but it was not bad originally. David Ross, was red hair a Viking thing? Scotland has some more redheads than most countries. Ireland has red warriors in their folklore. The Celtic, Viking are both red hair. Yeah, we have definitely more records of red hair in the British Isles, but we have plenty of records of red-haired Vikings too. It wasn't that common. Like if you see Eric the Red, right? If they call some Viking Eric the Red, they wouldn't call him Eric the Red if there was like a bunch of other redheads in that village, because there were probably a few others named Eric. So it was probably, the red hair was probably rare enough to make it unique, but there was definitely lots of redheads around that time. James Whitfield, how long were Norse people on the North American continent pre-Columbus voyages? Anything you might know? So yeah, we know from the sources, it would have been right before the year. No, that's not true. From the sources, they kind of discovered North America just before the year 1000, and they lived there, it seems, for a couple decades, from what the sources say. And we also find archaeological evidence now, so we know that they settled there. We just don't know for how long. I mean, I think it's a lot longer than people suggest. I think they could have been there for a couple hundred years and just integrated in with the Native American population there. It's very possible, but they definitely didn't know about it by the time Columbus came around, because he thought he was settling to India, didn't he? So that's good question, but we don't know exactly sure. I think if they did a little bit more archaeological digging, they might find some things, but as of now, they lived there right around the year 1000, just for a couple decades that we know of, at least. Andre Sarmasan, have you seen the anime Vinland Saga? No, I haven't. People keep asking me about it, and I have been meaning to watch it. I just haven't sat down and watched it yet, but I will. Doomer, what do you think about Vedic Vikernes? Maybe not from the political side, but more religious and historical one. Do you agree with some of his ideas? So yeah, that's the third question about Vedic today. Don't agree with all of his political views. Don't agree with all of his religious views and interpretations either in his books. But probably 90% of it I agree with. He really is great, and he's doing some good things. That's all I have to say about him, like I spoke about earlier in the video. H&H Saito, was there some kinds of status discrimination back then? Warriors picking on a blacksmith or cook or something because they're less manly and strong? We don't see a lot of records of bullying. We actually see the opposite. The Norse were very proud people. They were very easily offended people. It's the thing that I hate about them most. They got offended very easily. They were very proud people, so if you talked some shit to someone or bullied people around, they would probably kill you or have their family member kill you or something like that. So mean words were not something that were just flung around at each other regularly like that. We have the flyting, the poems, the rap battles that they did, but those were kind of more viewed as a game, as a sport. So it was all in good sportsmanlike competition, but I really can't think of times where some status discriminate. Of course, they didn't treat slaves that well sometimes, but they really didn't bully each other, but besides a few small outliers like the berserkers that I spoke about who came in and terrorized the village. But yeah, for the most part, there was no bullying or discrimination back then. Seth Baird, what are some good daily practices for modern pagans? Good question, and I've been meaning to make a video about this. A couple ideas I was thinking that I do at least. Anything out in nature is good. Getting out in nature anytime is great. Walking barefoot especially, you gain the energy from the earth. I leave many offerings almost every day. Just little bits of food out for the birds, leave it out in the trees or on boulders and things like that, as was done. I do that almost every day. Meditate is always great. There's different types of that. There's breath work and dream work. This is, don't underestimate dreams, guys. Don't underestimate your sleep, because this is where some really strong spiritual experiences can come from if you know what you're doing. It takes a bit of training, but that is the most important spiritual part of my day for sure, is when I go to bed. Adrian Forsberg, how do you feel about non-pagans wearing pagan jewelry and symbols, mjölnir around the neck? I don't mind. I think these amulets, these things have a purpose, right? They're not just a fashion statement. They're not just something to show off. Hey, I'm a pagan, I'm a Viking, look at this, Thor's hammer around my neck, right? They have a purpose, a spiritual purpose. Sometimes we don't know, sometimes we do know, but all these different pendants that people wore originally, if we go far back enough, they had a purpose, they had some benefit to it, whether it be to our spirit or our body or our health or something like that, and that's what I believe Thor's hammer is. So yeah, it's not a symbol of religion, to me anyway. It's like an animist, just a way to benefit yourself in some way, to make use of whatever jewelry or symbol that you decide to wear. Jarl, if you could choose only one book to keep for the rest of your life, which would it be? Golden Bow. The Golden Bow, for sure. Yeah, the Golden Bow for sure. I have that one on my shop if anyone's interested. That one hasn't sold well because people don't know what it is, but that is just such a valuable book. It has just written in the 1800s, and it has just all kinds of different religious practices and beliefs from all over the world over the past thousands of years, and back in the 1800s when a lot of these tribal cultures were still practicing these things. So yeah, and when we read that, we can really see the similarities, not just in the Norse world, but everywhere. We all had kind of similar beliefs everywhere we go, just slightly different interpretations and ways, but we're all trying to figure out the same purpose. We're trying to figure out the same spiritual truths overall. So yeah, that book is the most valuable thing. If I couldn't read another single book in my life for the rest of the universe, I would want that book, just so I know what millions of people, millions of humans, or billions of humans before us previously in history believed, and to continue those ways. Jerry Shine, why do some Viking names follow the pattern of father's name plus son and others don't, like Ragnar Lothbrok? So yeah, those are nicknames. Ragnar, Lothbrok, Björn, Ironside, Erik the Red, things like that. Those are just nicknames. But the last name is always the name of your father plus son. And the same thing in Iceland today, actually. That's your last name. So if every single Scandinavian back then in the Viking Age, their last name would be their father's name plus son. If you find anything other than that, then that's just a nickname that they were given at some point of time. Sebastian Erkan, why is your Norwegian so weird if you are Norwegian? Yeah, I did not grow up in Norway, speaking Norwegian since I was born, but we lived a little bit of everywhere. I've lived in a lot of different countries, and my English is not good either. My Norwegian's not good. My German is really not good. I'm just shitty at all languages that I speak, but yeah, I've been speaking Norwegian since I was born, but I didn't really live in Norway full time until I was 18. Yeah, I probably lived there like 6-7 years in total. Supreme Pumper, have you always been pagan animist? I've never been Christian or a monotheist. I was just not raised like that. My parents never were either. Since I was a kid, of course, you know, I believed in some aspects of the old religion. Of course, we all grow up hearing stories about the Norse gods and the mythology and things like that, but I didn't really start to become I was kind of an atheist for a certain amount of time, but I became pagan again, and I really didn't start to actually believe it and truly understand it until I understood animism, and that was probably 10 years ago when I started doing that and just learning more and more over time. And then the more you learn about animism, the more paganism makes sense, and the more you believe in all these old religions all around the world. So that is the significance of animism. Vitzerk Ragnar, I would like to know if the gods were the same gods of the Proto-Germanics. Yeah, so they would be the same gods if the gods from the Viking Age, the Norse gods, and were the same gods in the Germanic Tribal Age, say 600, 700, 800 years before, or even more. Of course, the gods have different names and slightly different perceptions of the gods, but if we even go back to Indo-European times, they were all the same gods too. At the very origin of it all, the gods were all the same, and they originated as the Indo-European gods. We know this from linguistic evidence, and what they turned into was just an evolution. You know, you evolve and the beliefs change, and different people migrate different places, and it turns into Greek gods and Norse gods and Celtic gods and Slavic gods, all of that. Sometimes it's very hard to see how that happened and realize the connection, but yeah, the Germanic gods are pretty easy, and they're pretty close to determine. The ones that we have records of, it's pretty easily to just determine their parallels in the Norse pantheon of gods, although we do have a couple Germanic gods attested in the sources that we really have no idea what their equivalents would be in the Norse myths, like Isis, Saxnet, Nerthus maybe. So there are a few that were definitely around in the Germanic Tribal Age, but probably disappeared by the Viking Age. How can I be so wet? Question about reincarnation here. So you said birthmarks. Yeah, so we have a couple Norse sources and other sources from different parts of the world that say if you have a birthmark somewhere, that would be where you received your fatal wound in a previous life. In your case, no. I don't think we have no sources that say anything similar to your experience. What you are speaking about here, you're just unlucky in this lifetime of yours with your fingers. But yeah, I don't think it has any significance as far as reincarnation goes. Nice Lanzisera, love the channel, and I guess I would really request if I can not see one. Yeah, asking about some Norwegian elkhounds. Yeah, beautiful dogs. I love them. Yeah, we don't see them a lot in shows, but we don't see them a lot in the written sources either. We know dogs were important. We probably find dogs more often in burials, actually, than in the written sources. There's a lot of burials around Scandinavia where people were buried with their dogs or their horses. Horses kind of for more higher upper class members of society, but a lot of people were buried with their dogs actually, but we don't have a whole lot of mentions of dogs and their uses in the Viking Age, even though of course I'm sure they used them a lot. And the elk hounds would be probably one of the favorite if that breed existed back then. Don't know, but yeah, they probably could have. Drawing the Heat podcast, day-to-day practice of being a Norse pagan. What kind of things do you do in that regard? So I answered that question just 5 or 10 minutes ago, but yeah, you mentioned statues or altars in here, and I think you want to ask about that. I'm not a fan of indoor altars at all, but statues I love. Like I've got a couple here. They're just like here. I've got these. They're based off of the actual archaeological finds that we have from Scandinavia, and these are just such powerful tools. And it's, you know, I'm not a fan of indoor altars. that's the statues I really love, and it's just important to remember that when we have these statues, remember that we're not worshipping the statue, we're not giving offerings to the statue. The statue is not the god, as ancient Christians used to accuse us of worshipping these idols and statues. No, the point is some of that god's energy could be stored in this statue and may be drawn to this statue at certain times or maybe all the time, and we can benefit from that energy that the god has been attracted to this statue, and then we use it to our benefits in rituals and sacrifices and things like that. So that's the kind of ancient Roman and Greek view that we know of, but I'm sure the Norse had a similar view. If any that pre-Christian Scandinavians did entheogenic rituals, since there are psychedelics and determinants that grow in the area. No clear sources, just some clues. It's one of those things, of course, we can assume that they did. All tribal primitive cultures did these types of things, experimented with psychedelics and hallucinogenic natural substances, and they are growing wild in Scandinavia. Of course, they tried it. That's not the question. The question is how often it was done. As far as sources and evidence, we have a couple. In the myths, we have a couple of examples of ritual drink that looks like a ceremony where the maiden is serving a horn of mead. We have that in the myths, Poetic and Prose Edda. We also have some rune stones and pendants that show to be depicting this image of a maiden offering the initiate a drink. We also have some witches that we believe to be witches or völva that were buried with henbane and also cannabis seeds a couple places in Scandinavia. That's about it. All the evidence we have in the Norse world. It's of course not confirming things, but it just gives us some things to recreate if we're trying to do these and assume basically what they would have done back then. Kong 1 fra Norge. Do you want Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish schools to teach about Norse paganism in religion class? Absolutely, of course I do. I mean, this is so important. I think in general, everybody should know these things, but it is taught, of course, in Scandinavian schools. But it's not taught in the right way. They're just kind of showing the myths and showing, the stories of the gods, and they teach about history and they teach this to kids and stuff. But of course they teach it just kind of ignorantly and talking about our ancestors are idiots for, believing in these things. So I don't think it would happen. It would need a lot more education than teachers have teaching in schools today. That's what I'm here to do, and that's what I'm here to start, and I hope a lot more people can learn, but you can't really force teach these things on people, and I'm sure the government and the Christian organizations in Scandinavia don't want Scandinavians learning about their native religious beliefs, so they will do everything in their power to stop that, I think, from being taught in the schools. But yeah, we can always do these things. It's just about teaching right things and using logic and getting these people to, really think about the beliefs that their ancestors had as something more than just stupid primitive beliefs. Carol Tessar, do you know some details about the colonizing of Vinland and which particular group of Vikings was involved? Yeah, so the Icelanders. There was Icelanders and Greenlanders, so basically Norwegians that had migrated to Iceland and had been living there for a few generations, and they're the ones that discovered North America. There's two sagas about that are pretty long and detailed. There's a part of Olav Tryggvason's saga, who has a large portion of the saga dedicated to the settlement of Vinland. And then there's Erik the Red's saga, and a couple more that go into a little detail about the settlement of North America. So I will do a long video about that, but yeah, you can read those sagas too if you can't wait for my video. D. Selene Magi, new subscriber. How Selene Magi is wondering how woo-woo do I get? much more than I want to say here on YouTube. I will be saying these things on the Patreon videos. It's not because I want to hide the information. It's not really information. It's just talking about my experiences. But I just put those things there in private. It's just because I don't want it out in the open on the internet. I'll share the sources and I'll share my theories on things, but in the things that I actually get into, I will not get into the woo-woo stuff out in public on YouTube here, but yes, I do get pretty woo-woo, as you phrased it. Gage Garcia, thoughts on Amon Amarth? I love him, of course. I've been following them almost since the start, since I was a kid. They've taken a little downturn the past few albums, but I still love them. They're my favorite metal band in my life, I would say, as far as like how long I've been a fan of theirs, probably since I was 10. But yeah, they're still one of my favorite bands, and I always go to see them live when I can. Block looks like in runes. What are your thoughts on Grimfrost? That's funny, that question comes right after the Amon Amarth question. I love Grimfrost too. They are amazing. They carry so much good stuff. They are like what I am trying to be with my online shop. I've just started now. It's been going for a little over a year, but that's basically what I want to be. That's my goal. They're my role model. I want to be like them. They're in Sweden, of course, and they are by far the best shop online for Viking products. And but it's a bit difficult to get those things shipped sometimes, so I hope to set up a base here in the US selling my things, just as good quality, just as good price, but more easily accessible to the people in the US who want those kinds of Viking products. So yeah, that's a long way to go, but yeah, really love Grimfrost. Paul Madsen. My opinion of The Last Kingdom. I love it. It's amazing. It's my favorite. I might even go as far as to say it's my favorite TV series of all time. It is really, really good. Of course, it's not super historically accurate, and they could have done some things better, but just the acting, the screenplay, the script, everything, the storyline, it's so much good stuff in there, 100 times better than Vikings. So yeah, I really love Last Kingdom. Too bad the seasons are going to end. Bear Nerd Fun. A video about Viking helmets and what types were used. No, I haven't made a video on Viking helmets yet. Viking Age movies and TV series, they actually do a pretty good job. That's one of the few things that they do a good job on. There's no horn helmets from the Viking Age, but I will say pre-Viking Age, from the archaeological finds, we do find some horn helmets, but they're not like the horn things like that you see on like cartoons wearing and stuff like that. They're more like antlers, or they're more like deer or like ram's horns. I'll put a couple pictures of them right here, but those were mainly used for ceremonial use, we think. It doesn't make much sense going into a battle with those, so definitely they had some really cool horn helmets. It just would have been used for religious and spiritual purposes. Mara Butlin, I'm curious about your academic background. Yeah, so my academic background, I mean, I've studied these things since I was a kid, always reading these old Norse Eddas and sagas and stories. Academic background, I have a bachelor's in linguistics, so that's specializing in the Old Norse influence on the English language. My master's is actually in international business, which is why I come across kind of boring inability to communicate ideas, as you say, but also broad and deep. Yeah, I come from a family of engineers. We're all kind of math nerds. I am too a math nerd and was always good at that, but I was shit at everything else in school because I didn't want to do any work. So I didn't go into engineering, didn't have good grades enough, so I studied linguistics and business, basically. That's what I want. And yeah, MMA, same thing. Half my life I've been training fighting. And that is still the plan before I get too old. I need to see what I can do with the MMA career. Eryn Z, do you know the main sources on Celtic paganism? No, not too much. I don't know much about the Celtic pagan sources. We have some folk tales. What I like reading the most maybe is the old Roman sources about the Druids. I think we can learn most about that, and also because they would have been very, very similar to the religious leaders in the Viking Age or pre-Viking Age. I think the two cultures were not that different regarding the spirituality and the religious leaders like that. So those are my favorite sources on the Celtic paganism, at least. Can you hear me now? This is the last question, and this is a good one. Which fellow YouTubers do you recommend for a good source of information? The sheer amount of cringe pagan is insane on all platforms. Yeah, there's too many cringe pagans, but there are definitely some good ones out there. I'm gonna give some names of people I like. Just know I don't agree with all the things that they say, but I still would recommend people to go to them because they have great information and they're not cringe pagans. Maria Kvilhaug is great. June Jasmussen, his channel Nordic Animism is cool. Arith Herget is cool too. I watched a lot more of his videos a while back. I haven't a lot lately because I haven't had the time. His videos are just so goddamn long, man. So I can't sit through an hour of him talking like that, but there is some good information in there, but it just like, you gotta weed through so much rants, but I like him a lot, and me and him are about the same subscribers now, so that'll be interesting to see how we both progress. Jackson Crawford is of course good for the linguistics and the literature. Yeah, you guys, I already spoke about Jackson Crawford early on in the video. Go for him for the linguistics, but don't treat him like a religious guru because he's not trained in the religion of primitive cultures or the Norse. Scott Shell is also great too. He has a great channel. He talks more about continental Germanic paganism, which would have been the same religion as the Norse, but of course they're doing it their own way, their variation. Gods, different names, different practices, and we have a lot fewer sources of how the Germanic continental European peoples practice their paganism, but there definitely is some there. So that's all for today. That's the longest video I have ever made and probably will ever make. I really don't like talking that long. My voice is sore already. I would start a podcast too. I would really like it and bring some cool guests on the show, but I'm just not good at those things and don't enjoy doing it that much. But I hope you guys enjoyed this Q&A and got a lot from it. Lots more cool things to come. I'll probably do some more Q&As, but it would be, for special occasions, maybe every 50,000 subscribers or 20,000 subscribers I go up. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm about to hit the 100,000 mark, and channels are either make it or break it at that point. Either I'm going to keep growing and grow even faster than I had before, or it's kind of going to peak as other channels have done in this similar subjects at the same time. So let's see. Remember, if you want to enter the competition for the giveaway, the 100,000, I'm probably going to get drunk for that. I'm probably going to get drunk and celebrate because that is a monumentous occasion, and I'll be getting that plaque in probably from YouTube that they sent for 100,000. So that will be a nice day to celebrate. I'll be drunk when I'm filming that video, and I'll be announcing the winner. If you just put your email into my website, you're automatically entered, and Patreons are automatically entered too. Like I said, there will be 2 separate giveaways for Patreons and subscribers to the email shop. So that is all I have to say for today. Hope you enjoyed. Vi ses nästa gång.